Welcome to the Rescue One podcast. Each week, we talk about challenging the way we do business in the fire service when it comes to mental and physical health. I believe there's a better way to do it, and I want to bring in experts that can teach us exactly how and why we should be doing things differently for the sake of our longevity on and off the job. If we can just rescue one of our brother or sister firefighters from preventable injury, illness, or disability, then we've done our job. Thanks for listening. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for listening. We have Megan Lautz here today. Did I pronounce that right? Lautz?
Lautz, yes.
There's only so many ways I could say it. Lautz was a fairly good guess, I guess.
We'll take it.
So we have Megan Lautz here. She runs the page Rescue RD. She is someone who I've been following for a while, has provided a ton of really cool content about diet, exercise, nutrition, and a lot of how we probably should be treating our bodies when we're on and off duty. And I wanted to bring her on today because I think health and wellness is super important for what we do. And I think she has a great perspective. And I really like that she brings comedy into it because that's like the direct key to a firefighter or other first responders' attention span. So thanks, Megan. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I wanted to give you a second and let you introduce yourself, like kind of what you do and how you got started into this world of health and a little bit of, I see you do like also strength coaching for firefighters. So talk to me about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Megan. I'm a registered dietitian, personal trainer, strength coach. And I work full-time for Fairfax County Fire and Rescue. And I specialize in first responders. So I specialize primarily in fire, but I also dabble in police because they have been brought into my contract recently. I originally started in 2017 working for Montgomery County Fire and Rescue through their OC Health Clinic. They basically had a wellness program manager position open for public safety. And I said, what does this mean? And they said, you're going to figure it out, as is tradition. So, I went over there and fire kind of let me in immediately. I was really interested, obviously, in something like sports nutrition and the fitness and the wellness side of things. So when they were like, oh, you could take CPAT. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And they were like, wait, we didn't think you were going to say yes. So I took it. It took me about 2 or 3 times to really get through, in the right amount of time. I wasn't very fast. But I passed CPAT. I did a 24-hour shift at one of the busier stations in the county, participated in as much of the recruit class stuff as I could, without actually going through recruit school. Really more because I don't feel I'm not an expert in the sense that I'm not a firefighter, right? I'm an expert in nutrition, but if I don't know how to apply it to your jobs and your lifestyle, then I can't really give you the right applicable strategies to go through life, right? So that was part of the big thing when I first started and have continued to do. I really believe in a boots on the ground approach and being on the stations where you guys are at because it helps me understand the language of firefighting or being a police officer and then being able to put that in with nutrition and fitness.
Yeah. So I've seen a lot of the content you put out and it seems that, you're addressing a lot of the hot topics, as far as what firefighters seem to run into a lot. Mm-hmm. And I noticed there seemed to be a little bit of resistance where people are like, oh man, like when they see stuff about bacon, me personally.
Yes.
Caffeine.
Damn it. Yeah.
No,
not caffeine.
It's almost like we've centered a lot of our habits around unhealthy shit at the fire station and partially off duty too. What are some of the things that you see that I know from what I've seen, you do you're okay with a little bit of stuff in moderation. We don't need to cut cold turkey and
Absolutely.
all this stuff. But what are some of the things that you've noticed that we do that's a red line where you put a line in the sand, you guys absolutely cannot do this anymore? Or is there anything like that as far as diets or stuff we're eating?
I would say it's less of a diet thing or what specific foods you're eating and more of a work yourself to death question.
Yeah.
Because that's the tendency, right? Especially people with kids, they just kind of run themselves into the ground and then wonder why it's really hard for them to stay away from caffeine or cut back on sugar or they're relying on alcohol too much. So really, if anything that you could really truly overdo, it might be the alcohol piece.
Really?
I've been to conferences with firefighters. I've seen some things.
Yeah.
8 beers in 2 hours by one person. So it's one thing if it's once in a while or rarely happens, it's your buddy's wedding. It's another thing when that's an every weekend occurrence. So really that's probably the only main nutrient of a you must avoid. But the rest of the stuff is, it's still worked into the dietary guidelines. It still was worked into pyramids and My Plate and all of that. It's just in a small amount. But what first responders see is, oh, it's a small amount, so I'm not allowed to have it at all.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of go black or white
and
with it.
I see that. And I see like sometimes, from what I've saw from you, you're like, oh yeah, I'll lose them if I do this. But, as far as alcohol, what is it about alcohol that makes it so horrible?
Well, and I'm not talking about like having a drink or two on your off days or with your friends or something like that. When it becomes a coping mechanism and not necessarily like a clinical reliance, like you need to take a shot before you go into work or you're not going to get through the day or you have the shakes and that kind of thing. But there are some people like they use it as an upper or a downer or to fall asleep. Like they start to use it as a crutch, but they're not ready to say, oh, I'm using this as a crutch.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that with not just alcohol too. There's, pick a thing. Like people will stick to unhealthy habits for whatever reason. I think we're past the nicotine, tobacco, days. I think there's still places that it's like a little bit. The department I work for in South Florida, we can't use any kind of nicotine at all. It's like instant fired if we're caught using
directly to jail.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So I know that as far as like coping or any kind of using it as a crutch, that's like almost like a mental health side of it where we're, trying to use this thing as like something that's either a comfort, to take away from some other pain we're having or any of that. Alcohol is just too easy, for that. It's like a numbing thing. I love having a drink. I try to be reasonable about it. I almost never drink at home. But when I go out, if I'm around the guys, like somebody's like the second we get there, like, okay, what shot do you want? Like we can't just ease in, like everyone's full throttle. And yes, conferences are, if you've ever been to FDIC,
I'm working on weaseling my way in. I just keep missing the application deadline by like 2 days every year. And then I'm like,
gotcha.
I'll get it together eventually.
Are you going there to present or are you going there as a visitor?
My plan is to try and go and present.
Cool.
So I'm presenting actually in January at the FDSOA FRCE conference in St. Pete's.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So I'll be presenting on nutrition for the fireground and then also with my friend Katie Dennison, who's a master firefighter in Montgomery County on recruit wellness.
That's awesome. St. Pete is only like 4 hours from me.
Yeah.
I'm on the East Coast, Southeast Coast. Yeah. So that side of what you do, like bringing all that to fire departments, how did you get working with first responder agencies in particular? Is that something you kind of always wanted to do, or was this a niche that you found we're just kind of screwed up and you wanted to help us a little bit?
Well, yeah, so like a lot of first responders, I got into this like dietetics in general or fitness in general because I wanted to help people. But the downside is I can't do blood, guts, or dead bodies. So the next best thing is helping the people who can handle that. Right. So when I started with Montgomery County, I have no firefighters in my family. I don't know any first responders as friends. So like I knew nothing about it at all. So it was by no means a targeted thing. I got laid off from Northrop Grumman as a wellness coordinator. They put me behind a desk. I was miserable, like many firefighters on light duty, and, found this job and fell into it. Now, cool. But since what I've noticed from a dietitian standpoint, there's very few dietitians in this space, who really take the time to understand that shift work and lack of sleep and PTSD and seeing bad calls and getting your butt kicked on shift, it's not the same as a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
So why are we treating it like that from a nutrition standpoint? There are adjustments that need to be made to try and make this a little bit easier on y'all instead of constantly making you jump or trying to get to a second story window without a ladder.
Right.
So
I was going to ask you about that because I only know of one department around me that has a registered dietitian. And funny enough, I think you actually work with one of them. There's a couple departments. Palm Beach Gardens Fire is...
Yeah, I write for them. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So they are in my county. They're all the way at the north end of my county. I'm in Palm Beach County, and my mother is actually a captain with Palm Beach County Fire Department, and Palm Beach County has a dietitian as well.
I haven't found her yet. I must go find her.
Yeah. Palm Beach County has a a dietitian and they call her like a health coordinator, but they're two. And one of them focuses on a lot of the strength and conditioning stuff, the physical fitness. They maintain like all the physical fitness program for the department, which they have an awesome one. And then the other one is all the dietitian stuff. So they help like a lot during the Recruit Academy.
Yep.
And I thought that was revolutionary. I'm like, nobody does this. Why isn't that more prevalent from what you've seen? Because you have education in this. Yeah. I mean, I get that part, but I've seen what we spend money on. Like my department is loaded, and so is Palm Beach County Fire. They're loaded. So I get why they have it. But there's a lot of departments in South Florida. Dade County Fire Department, loaded. Miami Beach, depends on where you look for the money, but Fort Lauderdale. So there's some of these places around us that have it, and I'm just curious as to the need is there, right? Like this is obviously a huge thing. More firefighters die from their own health than they do from fires, and that's going to unfortunately be the case for a long time, I think. But is that really it? It's just like a cost thing?
I think it's primarily, that's the biggest scary thing is the cost factor. Also, like if you have like firefighters, if you have battalion chiefs who don't value wellness and they're in charge of the funds, it's going to be very hard to convince them otherwise, which is something I've run into in the past. You know, Fairfax, our chiefs, this is what they live wellness. Yeah. So, you know, they went out of their way to literally hire me after I did some consulting with them. So, you know, that's part of the reason why I have Rescue RD as Instagram or Facebook. Like, I don't love social media, but I feel like there's no one talking about this. Like, how do we make nutrition specific to you all instead of trying to put you in a box that it doesn't quite fit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only way to reach a large amount of people is through social media. I mean, like that's it. I don't really like social either. I like talking to people. I like doing the podcast. Yes. You know what I mean? That's fun to me. Social is kind of like just a necessary evil, but you know, I love what it does. You know what I mean? You can get to people, but I think the way you're doing it, you're pretty good at it. You know, you have this idea that you're kind of getting in front of us with a message that is like straight to the point and it's funny. And I think that's what
it's
you
a fine line I'm still working on, you know?
Yeah, keep at it.
Told a lie a couple times, but you know, I don't intentionally try to offend people, but sometimes.
No. Well, if you offended absolutely no one, you're probably doing it wrong. You know what I mean? Like all of us kind of ride that line a little bit. And so you're fitting in just fine. Don't worry about it. So as far as I wanted to ask about caffeine consumption, because I've heard you talk about like, maybe people have seen this, but there's like a max for the day that we should be drinking. And then there's like kind of a max single serving, right? Can you explain why that is?
Yeah. So the FDA recommendation is to try to stay under 400 milligrams of caffeine per day and then 200 milligrams in a sitting. So I'm not going to say serving because I've seen firefighters and they usually go like 2 to 3 servings. And maybe they add the pre-workout to the bang. And it's a whole thing. Then it's a boom, as my friend Matt would say. Nice. So, you know, 400 total in a day, 200 in a sitting. So 400 total is roughly 30 to 40 ounces of coffee, which is not entirely unreasonable. However, I've gone to busy tech rescue stations and they're like, I've had that in my first energy drink, maybe second energy drink of the day, and then they have pre-workout. Then they might throw in a dip pouch that is like a caffeine dip pouch, which is a thing now. Like I've seen things. This is why I like having interns because I can see the trauma on their faces. It's more fun that way.
That's good.
So what ends up happening is you get tired and you have your first energy drink because everybody else is doing it. And that doesn't work anymore. So now you need pre-workout to get through your workout. And then, you know, the calls are picking up in the evening for whatever reason, and you need more caffeine to stay awake for that. And it just starts to pile and pile and pile and pile. Number one, the main reason that we're concerned with this is the side effects. You guys tend to look over the side effects entirely. Like, that's not going to happen to me. That'll happen to my patients.
100%.
Yeah, right. The side effects, you know, tremors, heart issues, insomnia, trouble sleeping, which then leads to more caffeine, all of those things. But another big issue, or the biggest issue in my opinion, is that sleep factor. So if you're doing 900, 1200, 1400 milligrams of caffeine in a day, which I have seen, you're drinking it later in the day. You know, you're drinking it close to bedtime.
Yeah.
What happens is, yes, you can have a cup of coffee and then fall asleep. You know, there's a lot of people who can do that. They have fast caffeine clearance rates. But what happens is some of that caffeine stays in your system and messes with your sleep cycles. So you spend less time in deep and rapid eye movement sleep through restorative phases of sleep. Yes, the lady in the ceiling is kind of gets in the way too, but I'm not including her in this conversation for the minute. But what that ends up leading to is you wake up feeling tired and crappy the next day, and then what do you reach for?
Caffeine, yeah.
And it becomes a cycle.
For sure. I love Andrew Huberman. I follow him like religiously. And he was mentioning earlier today, or it was yesterday, he did a post about something similar to that, where obviously people that have caffeine clearance, or, you know, if they tell themselves like, oh, no, I'm good, I can drink it. And it leads to that weird sense of security where they're like, oh yeah, I can drink this pretty close to bed and it's not going to bother me. But he was mentioning if you delay caffeine, I don't know if you saw that, delay caffeine 60 to 90 minutes when you first wake up, unless you're going to work out, you mitigate that crash feeling like around 2 p.m. and it makes you have better sleep at night, which I thought was awesome. I don't know how much of this we just kind of like listening to you talk about that, listening to the sleep side of it. I don't know how much of this we just kind of like, you know, put the blinders up. We're like, I know it's probably not good, I just don't want to hear it, or how much of it we're completely not taught or that's misunderstood. I mean, unless you have an education like you, how do you know some of that stuff? So that's kind of why I think what you're doing is so important. People, unless they really like to follow guys like Andrew Huberman or yourself, unless we do that, they're not going to hear some of this stuff. So that to me is extremely important, because I think, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I think sleep is probably our biggest problem with recurring stuff with health. Everything I keep reading, causing problems and compounding problems later in life. And
I'd agree.
Whatever we can do to try to mitigate that, I think is extremely important. I used to
drink.
And
I just wanted, wanted to add, like, you know, it's possible to cut back. And I think the problem is when people hear me talk about this, they're like, oh, you just mean like you don't want us to have any caffeine at all. And I was like, no, I do not want you to burn me at the stake. Like, I want to keep my life.
Sure.
Right. So I've actually had people message me on Facebook, or like I see them at the next station visit and they're like, hey, so I actually took your advice and I switched my Bang down to a Monster. And I've actually pulled my caffeine down. I'm sleeping better at night. Mm-hmm. I have more energy than I did when I was drinking way more energy drinks or way more coffee or way more pre-workout. So there's a stepwise approach that you can go from a Bang or a Celsius Heat or a Reign, which is 300 milligrams, down to a Monster or a Red Bull. Again, I've gotten to that sad point in my career where this is the recommendations that I'm making. Sure. We don't want to start drinking Red Bull and Monster if we don't already drink it. It's a step down for people who are already kind of overdoing it a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, I used to drink, I was getting really, really wicked heartburn. Me telling you this is basically my confession here. But also, if this doesn't underscore firefighter behavior, I don't know what does. So I'm having wicked heartburn and I'm like, man, how do I get rid of this, right? So I'm like taking Tums and I go, oh, it says on the back I'm supposed to like talk to a doc if I'm taking this more than twice a week. I was like, I'm taking it like 3 times a day. So then I'm like mentioning it to my captain, who's his wife is a nurse practitioner at a GI office. And he's like, that's not right, man. Like, call my wife. Like, she's going to ask you some questions. She's like, hey, I just want to go through your diet real quick. What are you eating? And like, what are you drinking? And she's like, any coffee? I'm like, oh yeah. And she goes, well, how much? I'm like, well, I drink like 3
Steady
cups. I like to drink 3 cups before I leave the house. And then she's like, okay, that's a lot, but I mean, that's not terrible. And I go, yeah. So then, but I have other caffeine. She goes, what do you got? And I go, well, I drink like a Bang, like 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And then the guys always make like Cuban coffee at the station. So I have like 2 of those. So we're like adding it up. And I'm like, I'm at like 800 or 900, sometimes 1100, 1200 milligrams of caffeine a day. She's like, hey, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but I think I found the problem. You're freaking drinking acid all day. You know what I mean? So I took that as quick cold turkey. And so I stopped immediately. And that was a horrible decision. Like, I felt absolutely terrible. So, I mean, right now I drink 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and I drink 1 cup of coffee like around 11 or 12. And I know even a lot of things that I read say, you know, don't even drink it after 11. But my sleep has gotten a million times better just from the holistic, complete approach that I've been taking for it. But with sleep, is there anything else that you like as far as, well, how about this? Like, what sleep tips do you have besides cutting caffeine?
I would just say like naps are additive, right? So when we talk about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, it's actually per day. So if you got your butt handed to you the night before, like try and get some naps in the next day. it starts to get challenging. Like, I don't know what type of shift you have. We have like a Nova or California.
I know what yours is. Yeah.
It's
that
horrendous.
One sucks. It's arguably the worst one out there.
Yeah, I would agree. Because if you get held over, you're just screwed. Like, you just don't recover ever. In terms of sleep, if you need to take a nap, right? And usually the recommendation is 20 minutes or 90 minutes.
Okay.
So 20 minutes is more of like breath work. You're not coming out of that light sleep. You're not supposed to fall asleep like in that deeper phases. It's more of just trying to like breathe, turn your brain off. You can actually have coffee before this and call it it's called a nappuccino or a power nap.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great. But that doesn't work for longer stages of sleep. Like, it doesn't work for 90 minutes. It doesn't work for anything longer than 90 minutes because then it's starting to play with those deep restorative phases. So, but those 90-minute increments is what you're going for those longer phases of sleep. And they do add up for that. I believe Alison Breger, she's really good with the sleep science. Annette Zapp is another person who talks a lot about sleep on her profile, Fire Rescue Wellness. They're probably more experty than me in this area. But I think sleep has a huge impact on your nutrition. I mean, if you got 4 calls after midnight, like, the chances of you making good health decisions the next day are probably not very good.
Right, exactly. And then also I've seen you like put a lot of stuff about, snacks after midnight and trying to still stay healthy. The prep work is the important part, right? Like setting up what you're going to eat before you, because we have like, a station supply of snacks. So when we're coming back, everyone's shoving Cheez-Its in their face and like just eating whatever ice cream was left in the fridge and then trying to pass out. Now, as far as eating late though, what's the deal with that? I know we're not talking about like in a perfect world. So for firefighters, we're up a lot at night. Is that okay to be eating throughout the night, like while we're on shift?
I think the biggest concern is like, if you have acid reflux, eating at night is going to hurt you sleep-wise. That's the biggest thing. I mean, I think some of the studies that I've seen, it might reduce your metabolic rate by 1 to 3% or something like that. But then, like, when I say that, people miss the forest for the trees entirely. They're like, I must not eat after midnight, or I will gain hundreds of pounds. And then they run a box after midnight and they're starving and they inhale like 2 pizzas. So it's like, you guys, again, aren't that guy who's just staying up on TikTok scrolling through their phone at 2 a.m., which some of you may be, I don't know. But day to day, you're not. There
is a really small amount of metabolic change with it, but it's not enough to warrant to say like, don't eat at all. You know what I mean? I get what you're saying. Unless, like you said, you brought up acid reflux. That's good to know. I think a lot of people always have that question. I've heard that rumor or that saying around there, and be like, stop eating,
after
and
8.
guys, stop eating after 8 or stop eating after whatever the time they pick. It's horrible for your metabolism. But 1 to 3% to me doesn't sound like that big of a deal.
Well, also think about it. Most people who are eating after 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. are probably not making the best decisions.
Yeah,
right?
Well, sure. Yeah,
they're watching Yellowstone with a glass of wine and Cheez-Its or, ice cream or something like that. Like, then it just becomes this mindless snacking depending on how late you stay up.
Yeah.
Personally, like, I end the day every night with ice cream. I've been doing that. I used to do that when I was bodybuilding. I just need something sweet at the end of the day, but it's like a portioned out like bar or something like that. But I also say no to sweets the rest of the day.
Gotcha.
Unless there's something like really good. But usually no one's giving the dietitian anything fun.
I get it. Is there any truth to like eating your sugar earlier in the day and letting it burn off? Does that matter? Like what time you eat like sugary foods?
I mean, maybe in the case of like a type 2 diabetic, like maybe, but I don't think for a healthy person that's something. So again, we have to think about like, are we missing the forest for the trees here? I think it comes down to your total sugar intake in the day. And what can happen this time of year is you have a donut at breakfast and then there's cookies on the counter. So you pick up like 3 of those spread out throughout the day. And then someone drops off a pie for dinner after dinner. And it becomes like a ton of sweets.
Oh, yeah.
Sugar, though, I will say, like some people, I'm sure you've seen like in the bodybuilding, powerlifting communities, you'll see people eating like gummy bears or Swedish fish or something before their workouts. And I actually put those on our canteen or attempted to put them on our canteen. Canteens don't always listen very well. But the reason for that is they're straight sugar. So sugar gets into your system very quickly. It's digested fast and it's into your system and ready for your muscles to use as energy very quickly. Compared to if I give you a Snickers bar or something higher fat, higher fiber, or higher protein. Fat, fiber, and protein slow digestion. So it gets into your system quickly, therefore it can be utilized quickly. So it's performance enhancing or performance sustaining in the cases of a box alarm, a long training workout, and those kinds of things.
I think that's kind of cool. I've read a little bit about that, and I've seen also people, as soon as they're done working out, they'll eat like something sugary like that, or have like
with like a shake or something.
That's kind of cool. But I think the worry was always, if I eat a bunch of sugar at night, it's just immediately going to go straight to fat. Like that was always the concept.
Calorie intake at the end of the day.
Calories in, calories out.
But the thing is, like we say that, that's super easy. No, it's not easy. It's not. There's so many factors that go into it. I mean, from hormones to genetics to shift work and lack of sleep. And there's so many things that go into it. And I get really frustrated, especially when I see like certain health professionals who will be like, they'll directly call our firefighters fat. And it's like, dude, like you get to go home and sleep with your family at night. Like you also didn't see like a dead child today. Like, it's just like,
it's a different game.
It's a different game. And,
sure.
and we really have to work with our first responders, because it's kind of like going on a hike with your buddy who's the same height, same weight, same age as you. And he's got 20 pounds in your backpack, but you've got 80. It's going to be harder to get up that hill.
Yeah.
So we have to make those adjustments.
And that's a good point. I think like also sometimes people think the tough love aspect or something, works better with us. Because I see that in the department as well. Like there's a matter of tone that people take during training or whatever else, where they're like, this is what you need to hear and blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it's not effective. You know what I mean? People don't want to hear like the negativity of it. They want to hear reinforcement, which is different animal. Not everybody responds to that. But I think that kind of tease up the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is like fad diets. So a lot of people in the same concept where they, say, I don't eat, I don't even know if to call this a fad diet, but people stay away from dairy because they heard someone say that it's inflammatory or it's bad for you, or they eat keto because, pick a reason. But the vegan, the dairy-free, the keto stuff, I find these, so I've been in the fire service for 14 years. So I have had
You've seen
enough
a lot
time.
Of diets.
Yeah, I've had enough time where like kind of saw the rise and fall of a couple of things. Gluten was like the devil for the longest time, and then now it's like it's not really. I don't know. People don't really care. GMO is horrible, and now people realize like that's not really that bad. I wanted to just ask about keto because I think that's the most common one. What is the deal with the benefits of it and maybe some of the drawbacks?
If you can't stick to it, it's not the diet for you. Point blank. So I know of one first responder in my career that I've worked with, and it's been about 6 years, working full time and doing consulting on the side, that stuck to keto. And the main reason he stuck to keto was because his wife had a brain tumor, and the doc said, hey, this may help. We're not sure, but go ahead and try it and see if it helps.
Wow.
Lost a lot of weight and stayed on it because he needed to for his wife to support.
That's cool.
The chances of a first responder being able to stick to that is going to be very hard. You can't have a cupcake at your kid's birthday party. You can't have a beer at your captain's retirement. I mean, it throws you right out of keto.
Yeah.
So we can talk about benefits all day, but there are other diets that also have benefits that are way easier to stick to. We could talk about science and whatever, but if you can't stick to it, it's not worth entertaining it, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. I know one guy in my house he looks like a genetic freak. This guy like walks by weights and he just freaking gains muscle. But he is extremely disciplined as a person. I mean, this is the guy, and I love him. He's one of my favorite people to work with. This is the guy that walks into the station, and when there's like somebody leaves cookies or cupcakes or whatever, he says good morning to everybody. He's super nice, and he's like, hey, get your shit off the counter, because once you leave, I'm throwing all of this right in the trash. It's gone. Like, I'm not letting my guys eat it. I'm not eating it. Like, get whatever you want, because it ain't going to be here, like, in 10 minutes. And this guy always, like, he sticks to keto because he actually loves the diet. Like, he doesn't see it as a diet. He's like, this is just the way I eat. That's it. Everybody else, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what I see all the time is they're like, man, I'm going on this trip in 3 months. I want to lose like 20 or 30 pounds. I'm going to hit the keto really hard for then. And then I'm going to shed all this weight. And then I'm just going to, see what happens. Like, it's almost like a tool. It's like a lose weight fast kind of thing, and they wrap their head around all the science behind it and saying that it's healthy. But I don't know how healthy that whole yo-yo thing is going back and forth. I would just assume it's not, but...
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, they're losing glycogen, or the storage form of carbohydrates. So their body burns through that in like a week to 3 weeks. I think it depends on the person. But also those glycogen molecules are binded to water. So you are actually losing not only weight from glycogen, but also from water.
Interesting.
The problem is then you start eating carbs again and you start rebuilding those glycogen stores, you're going to see a water build there too. And sometimes people report like feeling really bloated. Also, typically, if you're a type of person, like an Italian who goes keto, like,
oh God,
really, are you going to survive? Like, I really don't think you are. So then they come back and, you know, their mom's like making ziti and they inhale a whole tray of it. And then they wonder why they feel horrible. And it's like, you know, when we say things are bad for us and we're not allowed to have these foods, it tends to make this other effect. Yeah. So a lot of the recommendations I make are more additive. What can you add instead of restrict or replace so that you don't notice that X is missing?
Do you think that the whole keto or paleo thing is like, should we actually be eating like that? You know, as far as people always bring up the fact that they always reference cavemen or the Paleolithic era or whatever, because they were so much healthier than us, that we should be eating like that because we didn't have access to whatever else. We didn't have access to processed foods. We didn't have access to carbs. We couldn't make wheat into bread and X, Y, or Z.
We also didn't have access to penicillin, but, you know,
exactly.
Are we going to go without penicillin or the paleo vaccine? I mean, like, so like that it kind of crushes you. And also when you look at these diets, like Japan's area will have a different diet from somewhere in Africa. Like, it depends on what they had access to. I mean, there's one, I forget which country, that basically lived off of corn and only corn. Yeah. That would literally give a keto person a conniption if you said that to them. The other thing is too, there was actually a study, and I need to I'll send it to you. I can't remember who did it, but there was a study that they did a survey on firefighters to see which diet they felt like they wanted to follow the most. And keto, I think, and paleo were somewhere in the middle. The Engine 2 diet was all the way at the bottom. I don't know if you saw that one.
Oh, no, but I would imagine that.
Yeah, so it's low-fat vegan. Mm-hmm. How many firefighters do you think want to go vegan?
Like zero.
Like zero.
It's very few.
Right. So, you know, that was at the bottom. And the one that was highest was, I think, Mediterranean. So, and there's a ton of research on the Mediterranean diet, not only in the general population for improving health and cardiovascular disease and cancer, the two big things that we're worried about with first responders, but also implementing it into the first responder lifestyle. Yeah. They've done studies on implementing that. The challenge is, I think a lot of people see diets and they're like, I must follow this to a T or I am a failure. And like, if I have ice cream ever again, it's all over. And it's like, no, dude, like, just have the ice cream.
Sure.
I had a guy the other day that I've been coaching. He's like, I'm so tired of like the bland chicken breast and the broccoli and whatever. I was like, why don't you add barbecue sauce to that? And he was like, what?
Am I supposed to do that? There's sugar in there.
But there's sugar. Yeah, right. There's sugar in it. I'm like, it's either you're going to blow your diet on pizza or some Five Guys burger or 3 Five Guys burgers, or you're going to add 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce. So you can make food more palatable, which is why like the recipe book that I have on my website is like pasta and enchiladas and like familiar food. I just hid the vegetables in there really small so your captain won't notice.
Yeah. As far as like the resources you provide, you know, I know you said you had that recipe book on your website. What are some of the other things that you do for firefighters? You know, I saw you have kind of a wider background. It's not just dietitian stuff. So you do like strength conditioning and stuff like that. Yeah.
So like compared to the strength coaches that we have at Fairfax, which is Jake Patton and Brandon Holder, I mean, like I don't hold a candle to them, right? My full-time job is not strength coaching, but I do pretty good. I think I do okay.
You said you used to do bodybuilding.
Yeah, I used to do bodybuilding, cool. But then I fell on ice and I blew out my arm. I hit my funny bone so hard I passed out, which apparently is a thing. And it basically pulled me out of the competition. I was a mental health wreck. And that is part of the reason why I don't believe in extremes anymore, because I've seen what it can do from a mental health side of it. And I think that's part of the reason why I empathize with firefighters. But yeah, so like I do kind of it depends on what people want, right? In terms of free resources, I have like a recipe book. And I have 3 posters that were made for Fairfax that they let me put on that website for free. Heat acclimation, hydration in structural fires, and cardiovascular disease and cancer. But I will also like work with departments. I've written recipes for, like I said, Palm Beach Garden pays me to write recipes and articles for them.
Nice.
I do presentations, virtual presentations, or in person if you feel like flying me out. I'm right on BWI Airport if you want to jet me somewhere.
There you go. It's
but
like
also,
2.5 hours to Florida. You can be here really quick.
Real quick. Yeah, my aunt's in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, we can
nice.
go visit my aunt again,
Yep,
you know.
right there.
Summer camp is what we've been calling it. She doesn't love it when I visit.
Well, it's like summer 12 months out of the year here.
Yeah, exactly. So actually the nice part about that is I've started to kind of get interest in courses. So like I will start the day with like a lecture on nutrition, then we'll do a workout, then we'll do another lecture, then we'll do a buffalo chicken wrap demo, lecture, mobility session, lecture, because then I can get you to pay attention because I have your ADHD all figured out.
Yes. And that's such a crucial thing. Has it been like pretty easy to get everybody to buy into stuff, or has it been a lot of resistance? Like, it sounds like you don't come in there and try to change a whole bunch of stuff. It sounds like you're just trying to be really realistic. I would think that, like, if you came to our department, it'd probably be pretty well received. Is that kind of the case?
Yeah, so I haven't really forced myself on really anyone. Sometimes I maybe push a little bit further on the academy because I feel like the recruits need the information because of the incidence of rhabdo. We can go on that tangent later. But yeah, when I go out to stations, it's like, hey, I brought snacks. Number one, always bring snacks. If you bring snacks, you can use them as bribery, and then they will listen to you for 5 minutes because you 100%. Snacks. So, and usually I bring the buffalo chicken wraps because they're portable. You can make 12 of them in 20 minutes, and you don't have to heat them up. So, and they taste like a wing. Again, attention. Yes. So usually I bring snacks, and I keep it as a conversation. I come in wearing a t-shirt. I don't look like the HR lady or the doctor lady who's going to pull you from duty. And it's just a conversation. Like, and a lot of times I throw in some jokes and stuff like that. And it's funny because firefighters are like, why do you have all these like quick, witty things? I'm like, you have the same jokes.
Yes. Yeah.
Like every station. Yeah. It's the same joke every time. It's just slightly different. It might be bourbon is hydrating, and the next station it's beer is hydrating. It's like, wow.
You figured it all out already.
I figured it all out.
You figured it all out. You're good to go. Absolutely. Yeah. I know. And if you, it's funny too, because I know like when you're on a side note, like when you're a rookie and you first come in, you're like, man, all these guys, like they like give me such shit all day. And like, you almost like never know what to say.
Means they like you.
Yes. But after a few years, you can easily get the reputation of having like a very, very quick wit, knowing that they're probably just going to come out with the same few jokes over and over again.
Yeah,
so when you move stations, you're like that.
Yeah, my parents aren't a fan of like the cursing now. Like I have a lot of cursing and like really dirty jokes, and my husband and my parents are like, "Where have this come from?" And I was like, "I learned it at work."
100%. I when I'm doing the podcast, I try to like hold it back a little bit, but like I just had Stephanie White on the other day.
Oh yeah, Stephanie. Yeah,
Stephanie awesome.
Yeah,
and her and I, we were talking a lot about some of the science behind like CBD and stuff like that, but two very like minds, and partially, I would say like right up there with the freaking potty mouth. So it was just constant like, it's like, this is going to get an E on the podcast rating for sure.
There's going to be a couple bleeps for sure.
But it's natural. Like you got to go in there. I love that you do that. You have to be one of the guys, and that's how it always is. And every time I say like one of the guys or firemen, I'm always talking about it's just a general term. Like my mother's like a captain. She calls herself a fireman. You know what I mean? And I think that just makes you part of the crew, like you're coming in there just trying to help, and once we know that, like that's all you need,
And I try, like I keep it at their level rather than I'm holier than thou, you must come up to me. It's more of like, hey, so this is hard. That sounds like that sucks. Like here are some solutions. And not to say I didn't have rookie moments. Like you could call my friend Katie and she'd be like, oh my God, you should have seen Megan when she first came in. This girl is not going to last. We're going to eat her alive. But I just kept coming back. Yeah. Like, we can't get rid of you.
Hey, you also ferret in. Persistence means everything,
Right. And like, I don't know how many I've done hundreds of station visits. I usually do 100 or so a year. So like that repetition is part of it, right? I really think if you want to be a dietitian, a trainer, or whoever, especially a civilian working with firefighters, you better be where they are and not expect them to come to you.
Yeah. Awesome. We put out a little mini survey about to followers saying that I was going to interview you on the podcast, and I asked for a few questions, so I want to throw some out there. You mentioned about hydration before. What is an average or normal amount of hydration for a firefighter while we're on shift?
Typically, I go with the IOM standards, which is 91 ounces for females and 125 ounces for men. And that number increases if you do run a box or it's a hotter day or you're in a gas leak and you're standing outside and dying. So, but all liquids count. So technically coffee counts. You don't want to do over 300 milligrams in the heat, right? That can start compounding issues with dehydration. But a lot of people think coffee is dehydrating. It might cause you to lose a little bit more sodium, which gets people worked up. But if you've seen firefighter diets, I don't think you all are going to really truly ever lack sodium.
No, we're okay.
I think you're right. I think you'll replace that, no problem. You lose a little bit more in that first hour after drinking coffee or a caffeinated beverage, but over the course of the day, the total body water stays the same. So when the people hear 125, they're like, oh my God, I'm never going to get there. It's like, no, dude, coffee counts, tea counts, water counts, technically soda counts, but I don't like counting it just because I'm mean. But it all technically counts towards hydration standards.
Okay, cool. I like that. So the whole 8 glasses a day is kind of not very
for civilians,
yeah.
9 to 5ers, right?
Nice.
Like you guys are moving way more, especially in South Florida. Like it's always going to be hotter. And even if you're outside in the winter, like up here, like it's like 50, 40 degrees here right now. It's horrible. You know, you're still losing fluid like through evaporation and breath, and you're still technically sweating under your gear. It's just not drenched.
Yeah, I gotcha. So the next question, this one's kind of fun. What is your favorite food, and what is the food that you hate the most? I don't know if that means like hate like that we eat or...
Oh, I can answer it both ways.
Okay. Yeah, answer it both ways. I want to hear them both.
I'm big into ice cream. I love ice cream. I have that every night. So that's my favorite food. In terms of my least favorite food, personally, I hate pumpkin. So every time in October, people are like, where are the pumpkin recipes? And I'm like, I will never. Stay away. Not doing it. No.
You're not drinking pumpkin spice latte.
No, I mean, I guess, yeah, it's a hard pass for me. I'm more of an eggnog latte kind of person. But in terms of like, I'm going to take this as the worst food I've ever seen in a firehouse. One time, one of the stations I was working with who told me they did not have a budget for vegetables. It's a station of 14. You got a lot of you. $6 a head, just bringing in some money. They spent $140 on what they called school lunch, which included cut up hot dogs, SpaghettiOs, chicken nuggets, and onion rings.
All right.
And they also bought the styrofoam containers that they just slopped it in. Why?
Yeah.
Did you feel good? Do you feel good?
I feel
Are you happy?
like that's not that uncommon. I've had to raise my hand and be like, hey, I'm gonna put my foot down. Like, we're not doing this shit. We had a guy who wanted like once a month to do fair food Sundays, right? So Sunday, like we make
like the
freaking fair. So
like
funnel cakes, fried Snickers. He came in and was like, he made burgers, bacon cheeseburgers, but he had the bun was Krispy Kreme donuts. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. No, those are actually good. I had one.
They're freaking delicious.
Of course they're delicious. I mean, you feel like crap after, but
yeah, like the amount of shit that we would try to ingest. You know, one time they did they did fried Snickers, they did chocolate covered bacon, which really good. And out of all of them, I feel like the chocolate covered bacon was probably like the least, bad. I was like, I'll handle that.
I forgot about, we have cardiac casserole. That was another one, and that was just meatballs, bacon, and more meat, and some other meats, and not a carb or a vegetable.
Well.
Yeah.
I can't say that sounds too bad to me.
Like it had like a woven bacon top. It was a lot.
Oh my God.
I get tagged in a lot of stuff on the Instagrams and Facebook. I really enjoy it. It makes me feel like people are thinking about me when they're just disappointing me.
Yeah, when they go and they're like, I'm totally gonna tag Megan in this. Good. Well, I mean, you put yourself out there as the person trying to help, and I think that it's it's probably good for the most part. But yes. If you could wave a magic wand and stop us from doing one thing, what would it be?
Working yourself to death.
So it's more work, not diet.
Well,
take note, people.
Yeah, well, it's a cascade, right? Like if you keep working yourself to death, what are you gonna do more of? Caffeine, sugar,
Yeah.
other stupid things.
Yeah.
It's just cascade.
Yeah. And, from what I understand about lack in sleep, increases cortisol, which increases your fat. You know what I mean?
Tanks testosterone.
Right. Tanks testosterone. And there was in our department, we have 250 people. We're not a huge department, but we had a huge instance of lower testosterone. And for a while, they were trying to figure out what it was. They thought that the fire retardant in our pants was giving people like heavy metal poisoning, that it was, all this stuff. And one of our physicians, our city physician, was like, hey, you guys are busy. Like, you might not be sleeping that good. If it's a contagion, like all men over the age of 30 are having low testosterone, like way lower than it's supposed to be, then maybe it's just because they've been on the job for a little while and it's starting to catch up,
Right.
And
absolutely.
After that, it was kind of like everyone shrugs and they're like, well, can't do anything about this one. Next problem,
Right.
we do this a lot. We're just like, oh, we're not going to fix that.
We're going to just push that one down and see what's more fixable maybe.
It's so true. And, to some extent, I think, and this is an old school mentality, I'm not saying it's right, but I think we all kind of look at each other and we're like, this is what we signed up for, which to some extent is true, right? Like we did sign up for a job that makes us run after midnight. We did sign up for a job that's naturally unhealthy, but it doesn't mean we just have to like sit on our hands. You know what I mean? We shouldn't be gaining 75 pounds throughout our career. Like that's crazy. And we see it all the time. We shouldn't try to just say, well, I'm not sleeping at home. I'm going to also pick up a second job and I'll sleep when I'm dead. Like this is
right. With my two toddlers at home, my wife also works. Like, the problem is people forget that life starts to build after 20, right? It's one thing to just be a firefighter at 20, but it's another thing to be a firefighter at 40 with kids. Your parents are starting to get sick and all of those things.
Mm-hmm. It's really difficult to try to balance. And I do see that some people they kind of give up a little bit, when it comes to it. And then there's like the whole, again, Huberman was talking about the feeling of eating carbs, the comfort food side of it. There's serotonin that's directly tied to you eating a decent amount of carbohydrates. So people feel good when they do it. And it's, I think that's, like you always say, it's just in moderation, it's not bad. But when people are loading it up.
It also depends on how much do you work out? How many calls do you run?
Yeah.
How many steps are you getting per day? Like, those busier stations are getting 15 to 20,000. You go to a retiree station, like we're talking maybe 10,000, right? And you're not really working out. So we scale that carb amount based on how much you work out. It's just the challenge is once you're a recruit and you're in the best shape of your life, like mentally, a lot of people just stay there. They're like, I'm still in great shape and it's been like 10 years.
Yeah. It's relative. As far as like macros, where do you stand on that? At trying to like cater those to people, or does it matter as much as kind of like that if it fits your macros concept plays out?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I did when I was bodybuilding instead of like the standard eat chicken until you die.
Right.
Which I still didn't do well with. If it fits your macros, because calorie deficits suck at the end of the day. It really does come down to calories. And usually what I have people focus on first is if they're willing to track, because the challenge with this is people ask me, oh, what's the blanket calories? What's the blanket macros? Like, I can't tell you that. Like, I need to look at you. I need to do an assessment. I need to know what you're doing physically, mentally, all of these things. But the big things I focus on are calories, protein, and fiber. Especially with a new person who's like, not like, I already tracked my MyFitnessPal and I'm super jacked and I just need you to give me the 1%. Then we start doing the nitpicking. But when it's a new person, they haven't paid attention to their diet ever, calorie tracking, remember to do it is hard enough. If they do remember to do it, then like hitting protein and fiber is really hard for a lot of people. Typically women, it's harder to hit the protein, and men, it's harder to hit the fiber.
Why is fiber so important?
So fiber is an indigestible form of carbohydrate found in basically carbohydrate or plant-based foods. So fruits, veggies, whole grains. It's super important for keeping yourself full. So a lot of first responders will tell me I just have an insatiable appetite, and then I look at their fiber and they're not eating any fiber in the day. Because if you think about it, when you're on the run, like no one's getting a salad from Chick-fil-A after, 4 p.m. It's just... Sure. Like if you missed your lunch and it's 4:00, like you are not getting a salad. You are getting anything fried. Like it's just, or you're going where your engine driver's taking you and he's not getting a salad from Five Guys. So it just becomes hard, right?
Right.
To get that fiber amount in. Same thing. If you're at a station it's a meat and potato style station, it's going to be harder to get that fiber. So fiber to me is an indicator of the quality of someone's diet. So that means, if you're not eating a whole lot of fruits and vegetables, you're not getting a lot of fiber. So that's why I'm so fiber obsessive, because anecdotally, what I have noticed, and we know there's like a fiber deficiency. I don't know if we would call it that. Americans don't eat enough fiber off the bat. 15 grams on average when you're supposed to be at 38 for men or 25 grams per day for women. Firefighters in general, like we're lucky to see them do 5 to 10 grams a day.
Damn. Yeah.
It's really low. And what are the two things that fiber prevents? Cardiovascular disease and cancer. And it keeps you full.
Yeah, which is, killer for portion control, because I think one of the things that always happens, and I've seen this in the 14 years I've been on, when we finally do sit down to eat, and I'm speaking for everybody, we get interrupted, several times. When you finally sit down, you like have this voracious appetite. You think like, okay, I need to eat really quick. So you just grab a bunch and you end up way overeating, because by the time the signal gets from your stomach to your brain to tell you you're full, you've already way past the amount you should have been eating. So if we don't have that, from what you were saying, if we don't have that even throughout the day, we're probably shooting ourselves in the foot. What are your favorite, what are the best foods for fiber, as far as like specifics? I know you said fruit and vegetables, but. Yeah,
fruits, vegetables, like apples and pears are always really good, which they're technically in season during the winter, right? Oatmeal, beans. In terms of like fast food restaurants and fiber, Chipotle and Cava, because you can load up on beans, lentils, salsas, whole grain, like rices, that kind of stuff. So it's actually really easy to get like 17 grams of fiber in a Chipotle bowl if you make sure you add the right things in. And usually those things add flavor.
I love Chipotle.
Yes.
I'll eat Chipotle twice a day. No problem. What do you mean by being in season? Does that matter like for when we're eating stuff?
It's more of a cost thing, and also like a freshness thing. I should also mention that like frozen fruits and vegetables are fine. So a lot of people for some reason are like, you can't eat frozen or fresh. Like you only should do fresh and only should do whole foods. Here's the deal as a first responder. You're not always going to be able to eat the perimeter.
Yeah.
Because the perimeter dies in a couple days.
Yes. Yeah.
It dies in a tour. If you're on a USAR deployment, forget about it. Canteen items, they have to be non-perishable. I just did a post on non-perishable food choices on Instagram with the infographics. Sometimes you have to eat non-perishable, and it doesn't mean it's bad. And that's where, again, a lot of people just overthink things because of the one TikTok they saw that said they should only eat fresh and it should all be grass-fed, it should all be organic. And then they're like, well, then I'm just going to keep eating like crap.
Yeah. Well, isn't it kind of cool that, so the idea was for social, all these people that are influencers and trying to grow, they're going to say like, well, I can't just put out conventional knowledge because
no one wants to hear it.
Yeah, no one wants to hear it, and I'm not going to separate myself. So I'm going to put, this one thing that's kind of on the fringe and try to attack like a point of view, and then I'll
take
carve
some
out
steroids. I'm going to be super jacked and tan, and everybody's going to
all you got to do is eat liver.
Stuff.
All you gotta do is eat liver. Like, it goes right to your liver. It's very scientific. I don't have time to explain it. So, but think about that though. It's kind of good. It's kind of good for you because all these things keep happening, and now it's so overdone that there's just so much bullshit out there that if somebody comes out and is just like, "I'm just gonna hit you with conventional knowledge that you guys are ignoring," that's refreshing, So I think it's really good that you're doing what you're doing because it's not a subject that we tackle very often. It's virtually absent in any of the academies. Or during Recruit Academy, it's absent, except for those few places that I talked about. But, being on the job a little bit longer, and then also with what I do with Rescue One CBD, I want to be more cognizant of health and wellness. And diet is the most important thing, hands down, to help with all the shit that we do to ourselves. Like, I think it'll help our sleep. I think our sleep will help our diet. Those two things are like, I've become very interested and extremely passionate about trying to, optimize. Because, Peter Attia, the Dr. Peter Attia, this guy's like, he's always talking about like the three things that, I don't want to misquote him because this is scary, but it's also so true. He's like, there's three things that you have a 80% chance of dying of after the age of 50. It's cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, and neurodegenerative. So like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's.
Right.
He's like, so if you're over the age of 50, there's an 80% chance you're going to die of one of those three things. Like, oof. Which is wild. And obviously we are mortals. You know what I mean? We can't just defeat all that stuff.
It's inevitable. But again, if you're consistent with your workout, your sleep, and your diet,
Yeah.
and you let it ebb and flow the way it's supposed to,
Right.
you can stick it out longer compared to doing these crazy drastic changes, and you just keep, doing the wheel over and over again. It's crazy.
So your kind of thesis is basically just stick to healthy stuff consistently and don't worry about, if you have a little bit of stray here and there. It's more about the long term. So like eating one McDonald's cheeseburger is not going to give you a heart attack, but also eating one salad is not going to make you healthy. You got to do it
exactly. And sometimes that one salad is the person's first step to getting healthy. So like we don't need to make fun of them for it. Or I feel like firefighters do well with like a spritz of shame.
Yes.
Like just a spritz, like not enough to like really attack their character, but just like a little bit.
Of course. Yeah, it's kindness peppered with hate. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like we're gonna tell you some nice things, and then we're gonna make fun of you a little bit. It's more fun too. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you or to reach out because they're interested in bringing you into their fire department?
RescueRD.com is where I have all like my information and free resources and that kind of thing. Or Megan Lautz at gmail.com, but no one can spell my last name, so there's that. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I'm probably going to try and do TikTok in the new year because it's the bane of my existence.
Yeah, but I mean, with the reels that you're doing, it's almost the same format. It would work. Like, you know what I mean?
Platform.
I know. I hear you.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I hired my sister to do social like very early on because I was like,
you have to.
I don't like doing this, and it's super important. So, but you are kind of the face, so it's tough. But that would be really successful for you. I think TikTok grows from like Jason Patton from Fire Department Coffee and Fire Department Chronicles.
It took him like 2 seconds, but he's funny, so it's like
Yeah, but
who's sometimes funny.
Well, the fact that he already had a little bit of an audience helped, but I mean the rate of growth was not even close. Like his on TikTok versus there, and I think that's a lot of people. So no, have at it. I know it's a pain in the ass.
Pray for me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but lots of free resources. I do one-on-one coaching, so if you need a dietitian, like I can do it virtually through HIPAA protected Zoom.
Very cool.
And I think that's something to note too. Like working with a dietitian, it looks really expensive, but I'm literally there to help you like bust through these hurdles. So no one wants to come to the dietitian and be like, crap, I ate a whole pizza this weekend. I'm not going to shame you for that. I'm just going to be like, hey, that was hard, but like you're still making progress. It's fine.
Right.
So having someone there with you helps you sustain that progress. If you see you're getting stuck at week 3 or week 5 or week 6 every single time. So so Rescue RD is where all my stuff is, and I'm happy to help. It's my job.
Awesome. Well, thank you for answering all the questions. I know like 90% of these were my personal curiosity, but I think I speak for everybody. And, with all the questions they asked, I'm glad we got a few of those that people put in the story that I had. So that was fun. We will publish this out. I hope that everybody got some value out of it. And if they have any questions, just DM Megan, Rescue RD, or myself, or email, and we can get those out there. But I appreciate it. I really love all the work you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you so much.
You got it.